quick question though, because you did mention the clinic, and it's my understanding that, say, for our rising 3Ls in the room who might be thinking about pursuing the clinic, say fall term, even if it is still remote, it's my understanding that students who are still able to participate, and that those supervising attorneys are doing their best to get students acquainted with how to review police reports and make charging decisions. And so the clinic's still available, they're just not able to go into court. Is that right?
That is right. There is still classroom time, which is via Zoom. And then there is opportunity to go into the virtual courtroom and conduct hearings and all. It really is a great program. It's the two lawyers in this office who are leading it are great trial lawyers. Yeah, and so anybody going into the program is going to learn a lot. And one thing I forgot to mention is that there's a lot of pressure going into trial. I mean, trial work is hard and there's a lot of pressure, but people think that they're going to get fired for losing. And I got to tell you that it's a horrible, horrible feeling to lose a case, but you learn so much more from losing a case than you do from winning one. And so that is a lesson that I want you all to take from when you're afraid to go into your very first trial, that there isn't the pressure that if you lose, I know that you'll have learned a lot.
Patty, thanks so much. I'm going to turn it over now to Will McLaren from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Will, if you want to unmute and go ahead, please.
Certainly, and I'm far less experienced and a much less comfortable public speaker than Patty, so I'll rely heavily on a crutch of a PowerPoint, which I'm going to share, and will probably convey most of the points about the clerkship program better than I can. One moment, please. Oh, screen sharing is currently disabled, host, if you don't mind.
Mel, if you want to enable that for him, or you can.
Now I can. So, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. The building we work in is pretty, as Patty briefly mentioned. However, as you've read in the news, it's constantly under some sort of attack. So that's the downside to the nice hallways and the pretty exterior. You'll work in the Wayne Morse Federal Courthouse if you're a clerk here. There are a few federal judges who also work here, United States Probation, the Marshal's Service. So it's a great place to work. I worked here as an extern for judges back when. And it's like coming to a museum for work every day. You'll work with 7 different AUSAs here in the office, as well as a number of support staff. The U.S. Attorney's Office is a direct component of the Federal Department of Justice. The entire district is ours. However, the Eugene and Medford offices are the primary places that clerks would go. This past year, there's been 1 law clerk from the U of O in the Medford office and 4 in Eugene. And we're hiring for effectively the same thing. If anybody is interested in working in Medford, has any ties there, would like a change of scenery, that's just one idea. The types of cases are across the board. Far be it for me to try to list them all. This slide does them a bit better. Me as your supervisor, I'm primarily child exploitation and environmental crime, as well as some immigration crime, wildlife, firearms, and then some drugs. But I would say pretty much anything here you could and would have an opportunity to work on, including appellate law. The district's appellate chief is here in Eugene, and she is prolific in assigning things. I'm going to talk to Kara Greenaway, 3L at U of O, after this meeting about an appellate argument she has coming up. So that's just a slice of her experience. For duties, you're more or less split between research and writing and the misdemeanor docket, the CVB docket. So the CVB is effectively the federal petty offenses docket, which allows a lot of direct contact with defendants and opposing counsel. And it's basically anything that happens on the public lands or at the Veterans Affairs that's a violation of federal law, and law enforcement cite and then bring to us. So at least both Kara and Matt have been in court on the CVB docket. even in these, as Patty mentioned, terrible times of no court, we can make some appearances. And then in terms of legal research and writing, it's exactly what you would expect. You know, attorneys are kind of across the board generally seeking people to help with the very nuanced questions, whether they be broad or very specific. And I try to help understand those assignments, keep them coming, and then obviously help people get the type of assignment they want to work. And then these are just some good aspects. Very open door, and I guess open Zoom. I mean, I'm texting and calling with Matt and Kara all the time. It's not as fun as it was before, when, you know, we could pop in and drag somebody into court with us, but I think the opportunities are still there. And then our clerks have gone on to do some of these things, although I can't confirm all of that. I just assume that's true by way of the slide, because I don't know any of these past clerks who are all over the place. But every once in a while, I'll be calling some DC headquarters office asking for specific advice on a certain case, and somebody will say, "Oh, I was with the District of Oregon at one point." So it's good to know that there are plenty of paths forward, and not just to be an AUSA. And then here's what we're hiring. You know, this is a little complicated, so I won't spend too much time on this, but we typically hire one clerk to go on to be our lead clerk, and that is a paid clerk. The good and bad is, you know, there's a 2-year commitment there, and there's a paid position. And then we hire 3, sometimes more, volunteer clerks who can work for credits. And sometimes they take off a bit earlier than 2 years. You know, it's a little bit more flexible. So we can discuss this more if you decide to apply and interview with us, and we'll talk about these pathways. And then, you know, I won't go into this. These are all pretty straightforward. And then I will switch back if I remember how to do that. Stop share. Sorry, everybody. But that's the U.S. Attorney's Office. I think it's a great opportunity. I really like these types of experiences during law school, and I just reflect what Patty said. It's not as fun of an opportunity as I imagine it could be when we're all in person. I know Kara and Matt probably feel the pain from going from in person in a bullpen, being able to throw ideas around at one another. But I think we're making the best of a pretty tough situation, and I think our remote connectivity helps with that. But I don't need to go on about that because we're all familiar here on Zoom. So nice meeting you. I'll answer questions at the end, and so will Kara and Matt, who know the experience much better than I do.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I might actually, before we transition to our Clackamas office, I actually might ask Kara and Matt, since you are having this remote experience, if you could talk to the students about some of the work that you're still able to do, even in this remote environment, and what some of the most satisfying kind of aspects of your work with the ASUO's office have been.
Yeah, so I can go first. As you know, Will and Patty have kind of indicated, you know, the remote work experience is certainly different, but you know, we've been very fortunate in that for the most part, you know, we're able to keep most of our duties intact, with the exception of there's not a whole lot of in-person cases happening right now. But you know, in the alternative for the misdemeanor docket, which as Will indicated, we work heavily with, you know, we've been taking steps with actually the Federal Public Defender's Office to kind of alleviate the buildup and the backup of that docket. And so what's been happening is, you know, we get to do a lot of negotiating and discussing with AUSA McLaren and the Federal Public Defender's Office, these misdemeanor citations to try and negotiate the citations and negotiate resolutions so that backup is not, you know, getting to a point where it's too severe. And, you know, when we are able to make progress and kind of alleviate that buildup, it feels really, really satisfying to know that, you know, despite all the COVID challenges, we are still making progress and we are still able to get negotiating experience and to, you know, look into these statutes and these research questions. And then for, you know, the research component, we still get to do that pretty easily just because, you know, we have the remote login capabilities. So we do have we fortunately have access to, our research materials. The only challenge is, we're not meeting with the AUSAs in person. It's mostly phone calls or emails. But that's kind of what things in our office look like at the moment.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add about on that about the remote capabilities, other than that, you're losing a little bit of that person-to-person interaction, which I'm very confident will come back. And I'm optimistic that in our careers, hopefully we'll never have to face something of this magnitude again. But I do think that we're all learning really, really valuable skills that, even if we're not facing a pandemic in our careers, are going to be applicable. I think that we're going to see perhaps more telephonic conferences, whether or not that's a hearing, but just in meeting with one another. And it's really fun to figure that out along with AUSAs and shape what that protocol might look like in the future. So as unfortunate as it is to lose that in-person experience, I don't think that we're really missing, or we're still gaining something in what we're learning here. And like Kara said, we're still working on the misdemeanor docket. We're still getting research projects, and there are, like Will said, 7 AUSAs in this office. So, and they work on a wide range of topics. And I know I've had the opportunity to reach out to specific AUSAs who I know are working on cases that I find interesting, or just get something handed to me that I was not expecting and learn about something that, I didn't expect to learn about, which is something really exciting about this job. And that hasn't really changed with the remote capabilities. So you'll still get to work on some really, really interesting research projects.
Great. Thank you both so much. And Matt, I think you raise a great point that you've kind of been able to develop some really valuable and marketable skills in terms of learning new technology, experiencing what it's like to pivot as a profession, frankly, and what that means for a courtroom-based practice. And so I'll just kind of echo those comments that I do think there's a lot of value in these experiences, even if they must be done remotely. And just for those of you that are feeling fatigued during classes and feeling like the remote environment is a challenge, just know that you're developing valuable skills that will be attractive to future employers. So, and Will, I can give a plug for that slide that you offered to the students and confirm that those are the pathways we've seen law clerks take after graduation. So really exciting. With that, I'd love to turn it over to our folks from Clackamas County, Brian and Alexander. If you want to go ahead and unmute, we'd love to hear from you.
Hello. So I have about a 10-minute PowerPoint that I have pared down from a longer one that I give every year at the University of Oregon. I understand I have about 12 minutes, so that gives me a couple of minutes to answer your first question, a little bit about my path. And then I'll jump over to Mr. Hayes and he can explain his path. I started my career as a mechanical engineer working for Precision Cast Parts and made a career shift after about 5 years, having decided that that job was just a little bit too boring for me, and switched to law school at the age of almost 30. Just like Patty, my love of prosecution began in a law clinic through Lewis and Clark that was at the Multnomah County DA's office. And once I was able to get into the courtroom and try a case, that's when I figured out that that was the place for me, and that I wanted to be a prosecutor. So it's very rewarding for me to be able to provide that opportunity to law students, which is what our law program is about, is getting in the courtroom and trying cases. Ultimately, so you can figure out if, like me, that's the career for you. It's not for everybody, but one of the things I do tell most of my students, all the students, is that you'll know by the end of a year whether it's for you or not, because we give you an experience. It's very much like being a prosecutor. And so I, after deciding I want to be a prosecutor, spent about 2 years trying to get a job in the DA's office, eventually ended up here. And much like Patty, after a couple of years, there's not anything else you want to do. So you end up 20 years later still in the same job. Alex, you want to tell us your career path?
Yeah, it's not that eventful. So I'm born and raised in Clackamas County, Happy Valley. I did undergrad here in Southeast Portland, I decided I wanted to get out of the state and go to law school. I lived in DC for a little bit prior to going to law school. And I was at the University of Idaho. I was going into my last year and I was coming back home. And I didn't think I wanted to practice criminal law, but I had a friend that worked here in the DA's office, but not as a DA on the staff side. And she reached out to Brian because I asked if they had a clerk program, and she put me in contact with Mr. Brock. So I ended up applying. Generally, we have, when we hire individuals, they are hired for an entire school year. So they'll start their going into their last year and they'll finish approximately when they graduate. So because I was at the University of Idaho, I only had the summer here, and it ended up actually working out perfectly because there was an individual who had also applied, but he was gone for the summer. And so I started working for the summer. And when I had to go back to school, the other individual came back and essentially took the position that I had. So I ended up graduating from the University of Idaho, came back. I loved my experience here at the DA's office. And they ended up hiring me as a DA intern because I hadn't passed the bar, but I was still certified. So I was essentially a clerk after I had taken the bar exam, but I hadn't had results, and passed the bar exam, and I got hired the day I got my results, and I've been here ever since. It's been fantastic. So.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and do a screen share here. Let's see, share, there we go. So I'm going to start with kind of an executive summary of our program. And these are the key points that I want to convey or communicate to all the students out there, that this is a program that's been around for a long time. We started about 2005. We hire every year 5 law clerks. We have one that we carry over from the year before. So we have a total of 6 clerks, but 5 of them will be certified law students. In other words, they're third-year law students. They're hired for a 1-year duration. And then we also hire a 1-year, one law clerk that is a second-year student on for 2 years. And I won't spend a lot of time about that program or that position because that doesn't work with the University of Oregon. And I'll explain why that isn't one that anybody from the University of Oregon can really apply for. The positions that I think are relevant to you are going to be the certified law students. So the second year law students out there, I'm talking to you. Those positions, we hire 4 of them every year. They start out full-time in the summer, beginning in May, and it is a 1-year program that is then converted to part-time once you go back to school. And depending on your schedule and how ahead you are in your credits, it can be anywhere from 20 to even up to 30 hours for some students. We also do externships, which allows you to get school credit while you're getting paid to work for us. And then there's the most important thing for you at $17.32 an hour. Just for those of you who are not familiar with the state of Oregon, I want to make sure that you know that Clackamas County is where we're located. We're not in Lane County, right? But more importantly, we're not in Multnomah County. We're just short of Multnomah County, and we are proud of that fact. Here is our courthouse. It's a little bit like Lane County. It's old and it's got its issues. We fortunately are slated to get a new courthouse, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. Oops, why did I do that? But we call it home and we like it. Portland campus. So as I assume have already heard, University of Oregon has a campus in Portland for third-year students. And why does it keep doing that? And once that opened up, that's when we started hiring law clerks from there, because prior to that, it wouldn't have made a lot of sense because most people live in Eugene and that's just too much of a commute. So the Portland campus has certainly opened up those opportunities. And as soon as that happened, we started hiring about 2 law clerks from University of Oregon each year. And so just to give you an idea of where we are compared to that campus, we're about 30 minutes south. And we are in just off the I-205 freeway. So it's pretty accessible. This is our new district attorney. His name is John Wentworth. He was just elected last year and just began last week, actually. And so we have a new attorney, district attorney. Here's a structure of our office. 31 attorneys is kind of the takeaway from this slide to give you an idea how big we are or how big we're not. It's a good size. It allows us to really know each other really well, but not so small that you don't have a lot of people to go to with questions. As you can see here, we've got about 4 adult prosecution teams in addition to family support. The law clerks are assigned to the misdemeanor unit. As you can see there, I'm the supervisor of team 1. We'll have 5 misdemeanor DAs, and then they have the 6 law clerks, 5 of which are certified, that are under that umbrella. So let's talk about the responsibilities of the law clerks. We're a vertical prosecution in this office, which means that you get the intake, which is basically the police reports. It's kind of the submission of the case from the law enforcement agency that investigated it. You make the decision about what charges to file and how to file them, and the plea offer. We also do arraignments, pleas, and motions. All of those things are ultimately your responsibility. You may not be doing all of them, but the case stays with you until it's resolved by way of trial, plea, or otherwise. Our office is also responsible for doing civil commitments, and this has actually been one area that even in the pandemic, we're still going forward with. These individuals are in state hospital, or not in state hospitals, but in our local hospitals. So they're kind of like in custody, and they have to have a hearing within 5 days. And so those things are still going on even in this situation. And our law clerks are the ones that do they're sort of a mini 1 day, or it's actually a half day court trial. And so law clerks are still getting experience even in this pandemic that we're in. We also have a restitution court that the law clerks are responsible for, and a community court, which is an alternative way of prosecuting individuals, wherein if they complete the program, they can get the case dismissed, they get their fines and fees waived. And that is a program also done by the law clerks. You will be assigned around 75 cases that you're responsible for in conjunction with your mentor law clerk. We have as many law clerks as we do lawyers, so everyone has one assigned to them. And when your case is assigned for a trial, it's your responsibility to do it with your mentor. I'll talk a little bit about the training next. We have a 2-week boot camp that all of our law clerks go through before they're going to be expected to do anything on their own. And that boot camp, as I mentioned before, is part of the one-to-one mentorship with the deputy DA that they're assigned to. They're also encouraged to participate in all of our office-wide continuing legal education. This is a typical training schedule put together for day 1 and day 2. And as you can see, the whole day is booked out. Our primary mode of training, outside of the PowerPoints and the classroom type training, is basically courtroom observation. You watch what it is you're going to do, and then you do it with your mentor, and then you do it by yourself. Very simple. Sort of watch what's done, and then you get to do it with backup. And then if that goes well, or you do that as many times as you need to, we're confident that you can do it on your own, and then you're on your own. We're fortunate enough to have office space for all of our law clerks. Each one is assigned a office, and they're all connected to an adjacent hall. So all 5 of the law clerks, as you can see in this picture on the right, open up into a common hall. And it's not uncommon that they will, much like a campfire, kind of stick their heads out the door and have conferences and talk about their cases in a very collaborative way. And we're also lucky enough that they're all next to the the DAs, the deputy DAs. So again, open door policy and very easy to get your questions answered. Here's an example of one of the offices prior to us going fileless. So these files that you see on the upper right are non-existent now. We're completely fileless, and that has also helped us very much with remote appearances for court. Now that's the dry stuff. We also do a lot of fun stuff, and for that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hayes to explain a little bit more about that.
Fantastic. So let's go to the first thing, Brian, if possible. So the first thing is softball. We have a Clackamas County Bar Association softball team that, when we're not in COVID times, generally in the summer, we have 1 or 2 games a week. It's a great opportunity to get out and meet other DAs and beat up on all the private firms in the city, like Davis Wright Tremaine and all of those other firms. It's fantastic, great time. Next thing, Brian. So the prison tour, this is a great way to learn hands-on, and this is one of my favorite things that I got to do as a clerk, are tour these facilities throughout Oregon, OSP, McLaren, the Clackamas County Jail, the state hospital. And what we'll do is we'll schedule essentially a tour, a private tour, and we'll go visit the institution and learn what they do, how they do it, why they do it that way. And it's actually helped me become a better prosecutor. And when I know how the jail operates, or how the Department of Correction operates, or just how they deal with youth at these facilities, and it's an amazing experience. Get to get closer with everyone else on the team. Great time. Dewey scenario. This is probably one of the most fun ones that we do. We go down to DPSST, and they have what they call a wet lab. And that is a controlled city at the DPSST where they're training law enforcement officers. And what we do is we go down in the controlled environment. We have a DD drive from here in Clackamas all the way down to Salem. And they feed you alcohol. So they take your weight and they'll give you a certain amount of shots or beer, and you jump in a passenger seat of a car, and law enforcement officers, or training law enforcement officers, they'll conduct standardized field sobriety tests, and then you'll provide breath samples. And then you go back into the mock bar, drink more, maybe eat some pizza, go back out and do field sobriety tests again. And that's a great opportunity to really learn and meet especially the incoming clerk class, because everyone's colors come out after they're 4 or 5 shots deep. So White Elephant Exchange. This is a gift exchange that we do generally in December or January, depending on the clerk schedules, because obviously some individuals are going home. But we meet in one of our rooms here at the DA's office and have a White Elephant gift exchange. It's a blast. We bring food. And Brian, last year we went back and forth at stealing a gift from each other, but he ended up stealing it the last time before I could steal it again. Got a nice little water fountain. Still jealous. Hood to Coast team. So if anyone's a runner, wants to be a runner, enjoys running, generally every year we put an office-wide Hood to Coast team together, and our clerks more often than not end up participating in that with our office. And Friday team lunch, when we're able to, we haven't been able to obviously as much with the pandemic. We go to team lunch every Friday with all the clerks, all the DAs, and even all the DAs on team 1. And then sometimes other teams will join us. And Brian has a Wheel of Fortune, Wheel of Fun. And what we do is we write all the restaurants that are in the immediate area. And the most recent trial winner gets to spin the wheel. And that's where we end up going to lunch. Sometimes they get a couple vetoes if it lands on somewhere that we went last week, or Mesa Fresco. We won't go there anymore, but it's a fun time. All right.
All right, so back to me. Last and most importantly slide is what to do now. So assuming that's PowerPoint slide and those stories convince you that you want to come work for Clackamas County, I'm kind of the central station for applications. We hire at 2 different times of the year. The biggest hire is at the Northwest Public Service Career Fair on February 2nd, and that's where we hire our second year law clerk that we do for two years, the one that's not really an option for you guys. And then all the other certified law clerk positions that we have left. And that happens this year, February 6th. Deadline is January 20th. It is virtual, so I don't think it really matters what law school you're from, quite frankly. So you can do it that way. When it was in person and it was not convenient for University of Oregon students, we did on-campus interviews, what they call in the fall, which is actually in August. And that has already happened for the certified law students that are going to begin next May. In other words, May 20, we're in 21 now. So May 20, the students that begin this summer have already been hired, and they were hired last August. But if there is any first year law students out there that any second year law students that will be a third year, we'll be interviewing again this August for May of 2022. I hope that finally came out the way I wanted it to. So we're always interviewing, we're always hiring, but the email address I've got there is where the applications will go to, unless you're going through the job fair, then there's a special application process there. But we have 2 positions still open this February 6th. We've already hired 1 person from the University of Oregon that we did last August, and then 1 from Willamette. But it's a pretty robust program with lots of law clerks. And finally, I'll add that in terms of lawyers, for those 30 years out there, most of the deputy DAs that we hire in our office come from our law clerk program. When you've got 5 law clerks coming through here every year, that's the best interview you could imagine. For an entire year, you get to figure out whether or not it's a good match, and so do we. And that's why at least one of them typically will get hired. That's where Alex came from. And I would say of the last 10 hires that we've had, probably 7 of them have been from our law clerk program. With that, I will turn it back to our hosts.
Brian and Alex, thank you so much. Brian, I do want to just confirm for the available positions that you're recruiting for through the Northwest Public Service Career Fair, are those still opportunities that would be open essentially to rising 3Ls, or are you now just recruiting for essentially that 2L position?
No, again, the 2-year position for a second-year law student doesn't work for University of Oregon students, because I guess I didn't mention this. We're still making court appearances. The law clerks are doing all of our arraignments, and those are in person, as well as those other things, community court when we have it, and civil commitment. So you need to be certified in order to do that. So we're looking for students right now who would be, so you would need to be a third year. This is just so confusing because of the pandemic, right? But the program starts in May.
Right.
So you need to be a second year student right now, complete all the requirements that would allow you to be certified by May of this year. That's who we're looking for right now, that we have 2 positions for left. If you're a first year law student right now, and then you could apply, am I correct, this August? Yeah, because you would be certifiable by May of 2021 or 22, I'm sorry. So yes, first year law students, we would be looking at hearing from you this August when we do on-campus interviews, which will be probably virtual and not on campus.
Perfect. So for my current 2Ls on the call who are considering the Portland program for their 3L year and are looking for an opportunity that could start this summer and last throughout the 3L year, they're hiring through the Northwest Public Service Career Fair. The application date for that fair, the deadline is noon on January 20th. It's free to register. You can sign up today from the Northwest Consortium of Law Schools site, and you'll want to just make sure you submit those application materials through through the FAIR Simplicity system. It's a 2-step sign-up process. A lot of details have gone out from Felipe Alonso. If you have questions about it at all, just shoot me an email and I'll connect with you after this program. And then yes, for my current 1L students who are considering Portland program for their 3L year, interested in, again, a year-long opportunity that would start summer after 2L year, you're going to want to apply through our on-campus interviews that happen in August. You'll receive more information from us throughout the summer, but that would be your timeline for the Clackamas opportunities. Again, to get certified under the Oregon Supreme Court's rule, you will need to have completed evidence and legal professions or have taken and passed the MPRE. So for 1Ls, as you're schedule planning next year, try to get in evidence and legal professions as quickly as you can. I'll just name the fact that Patty's office also prefers, asks that you have completed those classes before you engage in the clinic. There's a different rule that applies to 2L students who are doing a clinic experience. You can actually get court certified to appear in your second year, but the earliest you could possibly work in Patty's clinic would be spring term of your 2L year, with the understanding that you would have completed legal professions and evidence in the fall. Okay, I know that's a lot of information, a lot of detail, but that's how it's worked. Patty, I'll just check in. Is that all still accurate?
That is all still accurate.
Okay, great. Well, we have about 12 minutes left. I want to start first, students, with your questions. I got a question through the chat around, if you do one clinic, can you do another clinic? Absolutely. 1Ls, we'll talk more about that during our clinics and externships fair and our last class in the pro planning class. But just to let you know, you could conceivably say do the DA clinic with Patty's office spring term of your 2L year, and then go on and work with say Clackamas County's office if you wanted to have an experience in 2 different offices. But with that, I want to open it up to your questions first, and if not, I have a couple of questions that have come up. And you can raise your hand and I'll just call on you if you have anything. Okay. Well, seeing no raised hands, panelists, I want to ask you, we get this question a lot from students who are interested in criminal law, but not really sure yet because they're just starting to explore criminal law, whether they want to be on the defense side or the prosecution side. I'd love for you to just talk briefly about how you might view a candidate for one of your experiences. I know, Patty, you'd be speaking kind of post-grad because any student can register for the clinic no matter of their prior experience. But for Will and for Brian, if a student has had criminal defense experience before, how will they be viewed as an applicant for a prosecution opportunity? And Will, I'll start with you first.
I'd say it shouldn't be considered an impediment or some sort of stumbling block. I would think it'd be an asset to be able to consider, even though we are in an adversarial position with the federal defense bar, we're not in a high conflict position with them. We're often negotiating directly, having pretty productive, I think Kara touched on this, especially with respect to the misdemeanor docket, pretty productive conversations, really productive exchanges. And if those break down, obviously you want to advocate for the office or for the best outcome in the case, but it is seen as helpful experience and not from any subversive point of view, but it's just an extra perspective and an extra diverse view that I certainly would consider as a hiring official a huge boon to an applicant and not some sort of detriment, but maybe I don't speak for the others.
Thanks. Brian, do you have additional thoughts? You're on mute.
I'll mute myself here first. Yeah, I mean, you know, there isn't a lot of difference between a prosecutor and a defense attorney. So it certainly, as a student, this is your opportunity to try out different things. And so from our perspective, when we're looking at certified law clerks, if they've got some prior experience in criminal defense, that's not an impediment at all. That just tells me that they're trying out different things. We tend to focus for our 2-year position on someone that has made more of a decision already that they want to be a prosecutor, because it's a 2-year position and you don't want to be locked into that position and then realize it's not for you. But, you know, 1 year is the ideal window to try it out. And like I said before, you'll know at the end of it whether you want to be a prosecutor. And I've had several people at the end of it decide they want to be defense attorneys. And that's just great because the experience is very similar, whether you're on that side or this side. So it's a different story, I think, as a prosecutor. If we're looking at hiring someone who's been working as a criminal defense lawyer for 5 years, that might be an impediment, but not as a law student, not at all.
Thanks. Patty, any thoughts on that with respect to recruitment from your office and experience on the other side of the V?
So ours is a fairly small community, and that's where the problem comes from. We've had defense attorneys apply here, and people we've really liked, but the conflict situation was so bad that we just couldn't make it work. As for students, we welcome everybody early on in their career to come in, and if you are somebody who wants to work here and you have great judgment, then we welcome you. But somebody with defense experience in this community can create a real conflict problem.
Thank you for that. Erica, I saw that you raised your hand. Do you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. So I'm not really familiar with Oregon law particularly. So in Colorado, there's the Student Practice Act, which allows us to be in court under a supervised attorney after we complete 2 years. Is that the equivalent of being the certified law clerk? Is that what that means, that you can practice under a supervised attorney?
That's a great question. So I'll tell you, we have the student appearance rule, which is in place for law students. There's a rule that applies to 2Ls who are in a clinic, and then there's the original rule that applies to, and we think of as our 3L student appearance rule. That's the one, the 2L rule says if you are a 2L, you can appear in court so long as you're doing so as a part of a clinic experience and you have your supervising attorney with you for the entire time. Now, be mindful of the fact our Oregon law clinics, both Patty's clinic and the one through the criminal defense or through Lane County Public Defenders, they actually have the additional requirement that all students, even if they're 2Ls, have completed evidence and legal pro. So although it's not required by the Supreme Court, it is required by our clinics. In the 3L year, as long as you've completed those classes, you can appear in court and it's not required to have your supervising attorney sitting next to you. And I heard Brian's team talking about the fact that there's the process of mentorship where you view the proceeding first, you then do it with your supervising attorney next to you. And then if everything goes well, you're kind of cut loose to do it on your own. I will say though, and actually this leads into another question, the Supreme Court actually amended the rule and now appears folks, or now allows folks to appear up to a year after graduation, so long as they were court certified. Previously, at least some local DA's offices waited till bar results came out before extending offers. I just wonder, Patty, Brian, has there been any change to how early you'll consider a candidate? And I'm thinking about my 3Ls that are about to graduate. So long as they're court certified and you know they'd be able to appear under that rule, at least for the first year after graduation, have you changed kind of your cycle at all with making offers?
So things are different now, but I have made offers and then we waited for bar results and in one circumstance, the person didn't pass. And that was prior to them being able to work. So I'm glad to hear that that person would have been able to stay and take the bar again. But our openings don't always coincide with waiting for bar results. And so it just is a timing question, but I certainly would consider that.
Yeah, this is a new change. And so it used to be students could only appear until after the results of the first exam after graduation had been released. And now it's changed to allow them to appear for a full year. So I guess the candidate, if they graduated in May, they'd actually have the opportunity to take both July and February if necessary. So it's a kind of an exciting change for candidates. Shelby, I see your hand up. Please unmute and go ahead.
Hi, so this summer I'm going to be a rising 2L, so I won't have an opportunity to get certified, where it seems that's where, the most opportunities are for people who are certified. But I do know that I want to end up at the DA's office because I did intern an undergrad. Is there something I can do in the meantime before getting certified that would make my application more competitive if I know that's where I want to end up?
And anybody can jump in.
Well, so if I understand it right, you would be eligible to apply in August for the following summer. So I don't know that there's much that you can do between now and August other than to get your materials ready and get prepared for that. But August is not that far away.
And speaking for the U.S. Attorney's Office, a great many of our clerks, in fact, I think all of our clerks start as Rising 2Ls. So if you know you ultimately want to end up at the DA's office, I don't want to speak for my counterparts, but we have prosecuting experience here for you to work on while you're waiting for your certification. And then you just wouldn't apply for the 2-year committed position. In fact, I think at least one of our current law clerks is moving on to a DA's office after she finishes out her year. From U of O. So come on over to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
And I think people are more interested if they have other life experiences besides going straight through, and I want to be a prosecutor and I don't have I just have to intern in an office, and then I have to go to the clinic, and then I have to do, so we haven't, I can't say I haven't ever hired somebody who interned, but people who have other life experiences tend to last a little bit longer here than somebody who's just focused on that's all they want to do.
So that's exciting to know. So diversified life experience, I think going back to that judgment piece, there are just certain things you can't learn in a classroom, and that's helpful when you're in the role of making prosecution decisions. I'd love to just kind of piggyback off that question around how do candidates stand out in their applications for our folks that are here as they're thinking about applying. What types of experiences or classes or tips might you have to encourage them to highlight in their materials to help them stand out? And then conversely, if there's anything you'd like to share about how candidates move from a yes, maybe pile to a no pile based on application materials. And again, no particular order if anybody wants to take that one.
Well, okay, since when no one else jumped in, I'll jump in first. You know, I think equally important is that if they're, here's an example that I think people overlook sometimes, is if your background isn't in prosecution or in criminal law and you apply, be sure and explain in your cover letter why it is you're interested, why you've made sort of this career change. I mean, we get a lot of applicants from Lewis and Clark, and I swear everybody at Lewis and Clark starts out as an environmental lawyer. And then, and at some point they realize there's no jobs, there's no career, there's no future in environmental law. And then they want to be a prosecutor. And I'm fine with that, but give me an explanation why all of your volunteer work, all of your experience and everything else has been environmental law, and now you're applying for criminal law. Because I'm always trying to figure out if they're applying just because, you know, they couldn't get in anywhere else, or if they really are interested. So, you know, make sure that your letter, you know, explains why you may not look like the ideal candidate. If you are the ideal candidate, of course, emphasize those. And what we'll be looking for is someone who has shown interest in public service. You know, I don't expect someone applying to have prior prosecution experience. That's pretty rare for a law student, but public service as volunteer, as something that shows that you're interested in the community that you live in making it better. And that's been something that you found to be rewarding, because ultimately I think that's what draws people to prosecution.
I agree with that completely. That somebody who include in your application why you want to be a prosecutor, why you picked this particular office, and make sure to proofread, because you go to the no pile immediately if you have a bunch of typos and grammar errors in your writing, because lawyers are supposed to be able to write, and lawyers are supposed to be at least somewhat precise in their writing and in their proofreading. And you'll go to the yes pile a lot faster if you do indicate that you have done things that have put you out in the public, that you have a life experience that's interesting, that you've done things that demonstrate you have maturity, and that you would be somebody that would, frankly, that we would like to hang out with. You know, you just put that out there for us. Why would we want you to come in here and join us in our little circle here? And I didn't mention it before, we have 29 lawyers here.
And I'll speak for the U.S. Attorney's Office. I think I'd echo both what Brian mentioned about public service experience and commitment. And if you don't have experience, maybe your commitment, why you want to come work with a bunch of public servants. And I'll also echo what Patty said, and we have to talk on a very regular basis. And if it's grating and difficult to talk to somebody, that can often be a hard start. So the yes maybe to the yes definitely or the no never pile, it can sometimes just be in a basic human interaction and what people have to say about themselves and what they want and who they are. And then in terms of I think we're just a little bit different in terms of why you want to be in prosecution, because I will say some clerks won't do purely prosecution. Sure, they'll work the CVB and the misdemeanor docket, but you can get through a year here with working on just some of those civil law projects, appellate projects, and working in on Indian law, and not necessarily be purely dedicated to the sentencing aspect or the charging aspect. So there's a little bit more kind of flex room if one is not necessarily sure that what they want is prosecution, which makes it a good start for those rising 2Ls, I think. And maybe Matt or Kara would correct me, but there's a little bit of flex.
Great. Well, I'm just noticing our time, and I know we've gone a little bit over, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time here. Panelists, I want to thank you all for sharing your time with us today and sharing the details of your opportunities in your office. This has been a really robust discussion. I know there might be some more questions that students have, and I'm really happy to stay on and talk with students, answer your questions if you have those. Will, I do want to just mention that your posting is up now. I believe the deadline is coming up next week. And so we just want to put that plug in. Students, you can find that opportunity in Simplicity. Again, for our current 2Ls, Mr. Brock's opportunity at Clackamas is on the Northwest Public Service Career Fair site, so check that out. And we'll talk in the class for 1Ls about how to register for clinics like the one offered through Patty's class. Please join me in giving our Zoom thank you to our panelists. And panelists, again, thank you for your time. We're so grateful that you continue to come back to the University of Oregon to meet our bright and talented students and to make these opportunities available to them.
Thanks, real pleasure. Keep making the best of a hard year, everybody.
Thank you. And if anyone has questions, you can feel free to reach out to me directly, and I would be happy to answer them about the office and opportunities that we have here and where they go from there.
Thank you so much, Patty. And students, I can make some contact information available to you as well. And I'll just ask Brian and Will, if there's someone other than the two of you that you'd like me to have students direct their questions to, please just send that to me in an email and I'll share that with students.
Sounds good.
Great. And Matt, I'm seeing that you too are also happy to connect with students. And so Matt's contact information is in the chat. For those of you that need to sign off now, please feel free to do that. But I'll go ahead and stay on and answer any additional questions folks might have. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Thanks, everybody. Great. Thanks, Alex.
I'm putting in my contact information.
Oh,
There we
excellent. Okay, I will, before we kill it, I'll make sure to copy that all down.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
For your time. Nice to
We'll
meet
see
you.
ya.
Okay, Mel, do you want to cut the recording?
Yes.